Alright, so welcome back. So in the previous tutorial we saw the basics of using async and sync programming, and then in this session I'm trying to see how to use async in Django and Django RestFramework, right? So we saw that in asynchronous programming you don't have to wait, right? So whilst you are waiting you do something. So something like a chef that is cooking. So a synchronous program is like a chef cooking. He knows that when he's cutting, this takes time. He has to fry, he has to finish frying, heating, and then you start frying and boiling and going out. That is synchronous. But asynchronous is that since he doesn't want to wait for one to finish before the other, whilst he starts cutting, he puts it on the stove, start heating it, starts frying whilst he's cutting some of them, and then he continues, right? So let's see how to do the same thing in Django. Django doesn't support Django now supports async views, right, which allows you to be able to run async views, not API. And then but Django RestFramework does not support async views, right? Does not support asynchronous, so you have to use another alternative. So let's see how to do that within 3 different approaches. So I'll go back again to our workspace. So this is the previous one, this is the asynchronous one. We took 11 seconds, asynchronous took 11 seconds from the previous tutorial, and then the synchronous took 1. So I'll go back here, our same location, and I'm going to create my pip install Django. We are building everything from scratch, Django. Then we use Django RestFramework, and then we also use Django-Ninja. And then the other library we'll be using is we use Django. Right, so we have RestFramework and we have Django-Ninja, and then Django Async DRF, right? So I've installed them already, and then perfect. So let's create our first project. So I'm just going to make a directory, and let's call it as async IO project, or we can just put it there. So Django admin start project, and I'm going to call it as my async IO project, right? I'm going to create this particular project. I'll move into my async IO project. You see the structure. Then inside here I'll just create my manager.py start app, and I'll call it as call app. Then we open it with VS Code. We can also use PyCharm, which I'm fan of, but today let's use VS Code. So what I'll do is that first, once I've created my application, I need to go to my URLs here, and then I need to add my URL. So path, which is going to be my include. I want to include is my core apps.url. So we need to import include from here, and then we also need to create this URL, right? urls.py file. So I'll go back here, which refers to URLs inside my core apps. So I'll go back to my settings, and I need to add my app here so that it can see it. So core app. Right, and I'll move into my core app directory, and I need to create the URLs that I created, right? So this URLs there, so I'll copy this, go back to my core app here, create a urls.py where I'll put my URLs. So I don't need include anymore, so I need to take off include, right? And then this is going to be the basic application. Perfect. So let's import. So from .import my views, we want to see if application works. So views .index, then let's give the name. It's going to be, let's say, home, right? So let's go back here. Inside my views, I need to create my first route. So let's import. We can import my HTTP response here, and then for me I can just do something like this. So def my index view, which I have to change, which takes in request. Then I can just go with system title. This is async IO in Django. Then we can return say HTTP response, and I can just paste in my title here, right? We just want to see if it works. So I'll come down here. This works, so let's close this one here. Inside my app.url, we have to change this one from index to index view. And let's run our application. So I'll go back here, and then let's run the application. So Python, and just py run server. Then we are running our application. So it's giving us that core apps is not defined, right? So the reason it's giving us this error is that we call our application as core app. So let's close all of this. We have too many things open. We call our application as core app, but inside our settings we call it as it's supposed to be core app, right? So core app, and then inside our URLs here we call it as core app, right? So it's supposed to be core app. And then you can see that it's going to start over. Yeah, perfect. So it's running, and notice that you are using the default server to run, right? So I'll copy this one and I'll open another tab here, then we run it here, right? So application works. So HTTP in Django, so the application is working as expected. Okay, so let's position it side by side. So what we are building, as you already know, is that we are trying to build a service that follows this particular approach. We have a Django API, which is the internal API that calls an external API. Okay, perfect. So everything is working. Now, how do we use this approach, right? How do you use async views in Django, right? So as I said, there are two different ways we can work with it. So this is our index view, and it will work perfectly well. But in case we want to use async views in this particular approach in Django, how will we do that? Right, it's a totally different approach in working with Django. So Django already supports this type of feature, and then we can actually use those features here. But we want to build an API for this. Okay, so let's see how to do that. So what I'll do is that inside here, I'm just going to create the same thing we did some time ago, right? I'm going to create two functions. So here, inside here, I'll just go back here and I'll create my utils.py. Then inside this my utils.py, I'll copy the function that we used in the previous tutorial. If I go back to open a new window, and then we want to open this one here, right? Remember we had this particular function here, and then we want to use these functions. So I want to use this function, right? We want to use this function that we did to be able to call the API, right? So I'm just copying this just to save us time. I'll explain it later. So I'll copy this function here, and then I will paste it here. And these were the two functions we used, right? So this one and then this one, right? So we want to use these same functions in our application. You want to use this, right? This is the fetch async, and then we can call it as say run, yeah, something like this. Yeah, perfect, right? So we have the main here, this one, so we can call it as right. So we have run main async, right? And then you also need to do this one is the async function that we had earlier on. That's what we want to use, right? In our application, we can return the result, right? This is what we want to use. So we would also want to have another one for the synchronous approach that we did, which was this one here. I'll just bring that one here so that we have the two functions there, just to save us time. So fetch data sync, and we are using request library. So let's import right. So yeah, just creating this two. So one to fetch it, and then run main sync. Right, so one is async, which is going to return the results, right? So this returns a result here. This is synchronous, and then this is async, right? So these are the two utility functions we want to use. So let's see how to use it first in Django, right? We want to first use these things inside our Django Views, right? Not the API. So we just go back again, and I'll create my, I'll call this, let's say, yeah, let's say item list view. And this is going to be our first one, and I'll pass in my request. Then I'll just do the same thing here. So let's give it the time. So start doing my time. We can just use a decorator function to make our work easy for us, right? But let's go with this option. Yeah. And then I will go back here, right? The same place that we have. Let's import time. We just want to time it so that you see the result. Then I will also import, so from, or we can just do import details, right? And then I'll just go with my details dot. We have two functions. We have the main. This is the synchronous one, right? We are running this particular function here. So this is what we want to run. We want to run this main function. Yeah, this is the synchronous one. So I think it's better we do this way. From dot details import run main, and then run main async, right? And then I'll just go with the end, which is going to be the same thing, times the time, and then I'll go with the duration, which is going to be the end minus start. Then we have a context, right? So context, let's pass in something like the title for this particular page. So let's go just say async Django. Right, so this is sync, and then I'll pass in the duration, and I'll pass in the data itself. Remember that this is a dictionary, not and then the data. So where is this data coming from? So this data is coming from the result of the sync, right? So data. So we have created our simple function here, which is going to return our result, right? So now how do we return this? There are several ways we can do that. We can just return, let's say, let's go with the JSON response. So JSON, there is JSON response from Django. Now pass in my context. So it is from Django dot response. So there is HTTP import JSON response, right? Just to return it. This is using the views, right? So this is going to be our view, and now we need to specify this item list view. So I'll go back to my URLs here, not here, but the URLs not outside of the project, to the URLs in my app, and then I can just go with my path, and I'll call it as, let's give it a simple name. So I'll call it as, let's say, list, right? Then views dot this, then the name is going to be list. Perfect. So let's run it again. Hopefully everything is working. If I come down here and I go to my list view, because that is loading and it's taking some time, right? So this is good, but it's not good for the user, because the user have to always be waiting for it to load. And whilst it's loading, what it's doing is that it's calling this external API, right, to fetch the data and then return it to us. So it is loading and it's taking some time before it's going to return the result. This is where we want to use async to avoid this issue, right? Because either you have to make it catchy that whilst it's loading, you are showing something here that it is loading so that the user doesn't leave your website, right? Or you use a front-end framework like React, or any of these ones, and I'll wait for the response there, right? Instead of using a proxy API. So you just call directly here instead of calling here and here. You can use a front-end framework that you do the awaiting here and then calls directly here, right? But you want to act as a proxy API. So we are using a view and it's still running. So it takes a lot of time, right? Hopefully it works. Yeah. So whilst it is doing that, we can now move on and then work on the synchronous approach, right? So how do we do the same thing we are doing for the synchronous? We have done the synchronous, we want to do the same thing for the async, right? So what I'll do is that I'll come back again to my URLs here, and we have our async here, which we have the result here, right? Perfect. This is one way, right? So we want to use this inside here. So how do we do that? Yeah. So whilst it's running, I'll just go back again and I'll call it as my item list async view. See that now it has come, right? And it took this amount of seconds, right? So now the result has come. If I go with pretty, it has returned the result, and it took this amount of seconds just to return the data, right? That is more than 1 minute. So this took this amount, so let's paste it here. Right, perfect. Now let's do the same thing for the same request, and let's see if we can do something similar in Django using the views, right? So using this approach, we cannot work using the normal server. We have to use a different application for it to work. So let's see how it works. So first I'll come back here, the same thing we did. So I'll copy everything from here and then I will paste it here, right? The same thing, nothing changes. And this is, we don't have the duration yet. This is async, right? So how do we use it? So now we are using the async function, the one we imported from here, to call our application. So this is going to be async, right? Get a result and then we return it here. How do we run it, right? We cannot run it because this is an async function. In case we want to run this, it will not work. So if I go back here, let's add the endpoint to our URLs here. Let's close this, add it to our URLs here. So I'll go back here, path, and let's call it as async list, then views dot here, right? Item list async view, let's call it async view, name is equal to async list, right? So this is the other function that we are using, right? And then I'll call it as view, right? Now because it's an async function here, running within a synchronous function, it's not going to work. So if I go back here and I just change it to async / list, you see that we have an object of type coroutine is not JSON serializable. So let's see if we can make it serializable. So what I would do is that instead of this option here, right, in which we return option like this, we can change this particular function and do it in this way. There's another way we can also do that, just return it individually, like one after the other, right? So I can simply do something like this. We got the results, we gather 1, 2, 3, right? We can return await results. Yeah, let's try it again, right? This way doesn't work. We can also do yeah, something like this. So we are still failing because it's saying that it's not JSON serializable, right? So how will we fix this particular data, right? Simple, just have to go back here, and then this is an async function, right? So we have to say that, okay, instead of this await we have here, right, we can use this await here. So still not change anything. This await here, we can also call it here, save it, and let's rerun. It's failing, right? So await allowed only within an async function, so that's why it's failing. So we need to convert this function into an async function. So I have to go back again and just create my async. I cannot spell async, right? And now let's go back again. It's restricted. If I refresh it, so it's taking some time. You don't know whether it's even working or not. It's taking some time for it to restruct. It's taking so much time, right? So this is the async view, but Django also has some features that allows us to be able to do that. If I go back to the official Django website, so there's Django Async support. For the support views, we have it here, and then you can see that it has some options that we can do, right? So we have async views that we can actually use, right? So we have to go with this option here, import this, and then convert this one. This is the decorator. Then you have to pass this decorator on top of your function, right, to make it async, right? So something like this, you have it here, and then you pass it on top of it. So let's see if we got some results. Yeah, perfect. And it took, you can see that it took what, 459 seconds, right? Which is quite cheaper and then easy than the previous one, right? So this is the async view of Django, right, in which we have a normal, this is still running on my manage.py. It's still running here, right, the normal instance. So with this feature, this comes from Django 5 and 4 support, you automatically have the option of serving a synchronous function and then an asynchronous, right? So you have, the most important thing is you need to have an async function. You must await it here, and then you must convert this function into an async, right, so that you can see the result. So this is one of the ways, right? Perfect. The other way is that you can also use as we had, so this one gave us this. Let's paste it here, the duration. Okay, right, so this can give us quite less, right, quite very less. So the other alternative that I can also go with from async, as you saw from the docs here, we can also use async ref to create the same thing, which is a very nice feature, right? This one here. You can also use this option here, and then you convert the sync to async. So if you have a synchronous function like this, you can now decorate it, right? You can use this one to decorate your function to convert this sync to async, right? And now you have to await it, right? You have to await for it to come. So this is one of the ways you can use it, right? Perfect. So that is how to use async in Django. So the first one is that you have to have an async function, and then you use this option, or you can also use this approach. Let's see the other alternative, right? So we can also, this is a view, right? So it works because it's a view and we're using JSON. But what about an API? Can we do the same thing for an API, right? How do we do the same thing for an API? So we go back here, and then I'm going to, inside this location here, I'll create my API, right, .py. Then we want to use Django RestFramework to help us with that. So from Django RestFramework, right, import .views, I want to import my API view. Can we do the same thing with this? So I'll create my class and I'll call it a sync API view, right, which inherits my API view, and then I'll just go back again to my views. It's the same logic, it doesn't change anything. I will paste in this. So let's import. So from .utils import run main async and run main sync. The same idea. So def get, so goes with request. You can pass in the quirks there. So we are doing the same thing above. Nothing that much change. Let's import time, and then we can now return. So return my response. So we need to import, so from RestFramework dot response import response, right? And then I'll pass in the data that I want to pass it. So this is another way we can also work. So using this approach, we have seen how to use the views. Let's see how to use the API view. So using this approach, I can just return my data is equal to my context, right? Something like this. So this is one way. This is an async view, right? And in case we want to use it, right, you will just have to go back again to my URLs here, and then let's go with from dot import API, and then I'll just call this as my API, right, which is path. Then let's go to API slash list. Then this is going to be my API dot sync, right? We want to import this. Right, perfect. So we can just give the name. Right, perfect. So let's go back again. You can use Swagger, but we don't want to just work with the Swagger yet. So this is the other one. I'll just open another tab, and then this goes with my API slash my list. So sync takes one position argument. It's got one, so I think it's supposed to be this option here. I always sometimes forget about this, right? So the reason it's failing is because of how we wrote our function. So async view, I have to go back here to my API view, and then since this is a class we are inheriting, we have to call it a self. Yeah, right. So because it's a class we are inheriting from the class, that's why it failed. And then we have to save it, refresh. It's working, but it's taking time, right? It will take time and then do the same thing, return a result. Right? This is using an Django REST framework, right? So let's see, it's running. But based on this approach, in case we also want to convert this one to an async, we can also do the same thing here. So whilst it's running, let's see how to do the same thing. So class, then I'll call that async API view. So it's giving us a template does not exist. So why is it saying this template does not exist, right? Because of the route, right? Because of the route, so it's giving us this error. So let's see. So it's API slash list API. Yeah, I think that's why it's failing. So let's fix this issue. We can also use Swagger, right, to help us fix this issue. Yeah, but it's still okay. API does not exist. So we can do one thing. We can go back to our settings, and then we can add RestFramework here. Restart it because we forgot it in our setting, because we added the package but we forgot to include it here. So let's refresh. Let's close this one. We can also use Django REST, yet another Swagger. So we can simply go to DRF here. Let's add it straight away. So first I'll just come down here. So pip, you want to just add the Swagger to it. Install Django DRF Yes, to add the Swagger. And then what you need to do is we need to import some stuff here. So I come down here, so it's working, right? I'll just go back here. This we are taking all of this. That's the nice thing about Django, right? It's so cool. All you have to do is just get the library that you want. So you have installed them. I need to copy this, which I've copied, then paste it here, right? So you have it here, and then I need to add the Swagger docs redoc stuff on top. You can add it here, you can add it just above the API. And now if I go back, and then right, this is what you added. So it's not working, so let's refresh. So now I just switch from here to the Swagger slash Swagger. If I go with Swagger, so the template does not exist. Why? Because we have to add this package to our settings, because it doesn't see it, right? So you have to add it here, and then it sees it. So now, so it's saying, okay, no model name this, because we did not add it yet. So let me close it. We already have it installed. Perfect. And we can run it here. Right, it's saying, okay, this does not exist. So why is it giving us this error? So let's go back again and check where we have that error from. So it's not supposed to be this, right? It's supposed to be this underscore, and now it works. Perfect. So let's refresh it again. We have our Swagger endpoint, and we have our list there, right? So you could see the reason we could only see the list. That's the nice thing about this. The reason we can see only the list API view, this one, is because this comes after, right? This, if I put this one on top, these ones are also going to show somehow. It's funny because of how it is generated, except I hide it. Now if I come down here and I click on this my endpoint, it's running. We can see the results later on once it's done. Right, perfect. This took like 5 seconds, which was quite fast, right? Very fast. Very good. It was fast. Now let's see again. How do we make this async, right? So in case we want to make this one async, we can just do the same thing. If I go with this, it's not going to work, right? So self request. The same approach we did for our views. You want to use the same thing here. Hoping it will work, right? So you may be thinking that this is supposed to work. And then in case we want to return this, return response, then the data is going to be the context, right? And you see that it's giving us an error, right? Because this is not async. So you have to convert this one to async, right? And then the error is gone. But now if I come down to my URLs and let's add the async one, this is going to be this is async, and this will be async, right? Once I do this, right, you're going to see an error. So let's go back again, refresh. If I check the logs, it's like, okay, async has no attribute as view. So why is this? Why do we have this error, right? You can see the color difference. Why do we have this error? Because Django RestFramework does not support async view. So how can we solve it? So there are two ways you can solve it. The first approach is to use, you can use aDRF, right? Which in theory, the aDRF, that is asynchronous Django RestFramework, what it's doing is that it's using this sync. It is using this same approach that we had here. This, right? It's doing this behind the scene to convert what we need to convert, right, to the right base. So it's using this one to convert the entire stuff to async view, right? So it's using this to sync to async, right, to make it work. So we can quickly fix it. That is the first approach. That is number one. Number two is that we can also use Django-Ninja to help us fix that issue. So how do we use the first one here, which is a simple approach? The first one, that I'll just go back again to here, my workspace, and I'll just go with pip install aDRF, right? So Django RestFramework, asynchronous DRF. Then I'll come down here, maybe another time I'll do a whole tutorial on it. Then I will import it. So it's going to be from aDRF.views import APIView as async API view, right? Something like that. And then let's change this to list, right? Async list API view, something like this, so that we don't conflict ourselves. And then now we can pass it here, and I'll pass it here, right? So we are inheriting from this. Okay, this even failed, right? I don't know whether you noticed. Let's paste this one here and see if it will work. I wanted to show that it actually is not working, right? So let's go back again. We are inheriting from async, and then let's see, go back, refresh. We have the two endpoints. We have the sync and async. It's failing, right? It's saying, okay, expected a response, HTTP response, class routine, coroutine, right? It's failing because of this, right? Because it's not an async. We need a way to run it, right? The response, this response doesn't support that yet, right? So it's still failing, right? If I make it something like, say, JSON response, which is totally different, it's not going to work. So what we want to do is that we can now use what I suggested. So from aDRF.views import my API view, right? And I want to import this one as async API view, and then I will inherit from this one instead of this one. And let's call this one list API. Then I'll change this one from here to list API, save it. So let's go back again, refresh. Hopefully it works. Now you can see that now it's working. It's not giving us any error yet. So what you are doing is that you are using a different approach, right? You are using a first package called Django DRF, aDRF, right? Async DRF, which is behind the scene is using sync to async to convert what it needs to convert to the respective option, and then we can get our result, right? So now it has to return our result. So this took 26 seconds. So this is how to use async in Django based on a response using this particular library. All you have to do is just import the library from here, and you can get our response, right? Perfect, which is quite faster. If we check the synchronous one, this is the async one. Let's check the synchronous one. So this one took 26 seconds. Let's see how fast the other one will take. It's taking some time, so let's see the next alternative. So next alternative is to use Django-Ninja. This took 31 seconds, right? 31 seconds and then 26 seconds, which is not bad, right? Perfect. So at least we have reduced like 16 seconds from it. The next alternative is to use Django-Ninja. So how do we use Django-Ninja within this option here, right? So we can use both Django-Ninja and then Django RestFramework within the same application. So how do we do that? So what I'll do is that I'll come back here, the same location, and I'll create another file, and I'll call it as, let's say, APIView2, right, .py. And then from here, I'm going to go from Ninja, right? I'm going to import Ninja. Right, so this is what we are using. So this is also another alternative. So we are using Django-Ninja within our application, right? Which is my Ninja. And then the next thing we need is we need to also import some libraries to help us with that. So Django-Ninja schema to do our serialization, just for errors, for the response, async IO. Then I need to create my API, which is Django-Ninja. Initialize it. Let's create our serializer, and I'll call it as, let's say, data schema, which will take my schema. Then I'll pass in my duration. Right, so this, we have my duration here, right? This duration here, which in our case, let's call it as a float. And then we also had our data itself, which in this case is any, right? Because all of this, we just want to simplify it. And then we also have a title, which is a string, right? Perfect. So this is class attribute. That's attribute. Yeah, it's an attribute. Yeah. Perfect. So we need to import any from typing. So from typing, import any. Right. Perfect. So we have created our schema. We have our initialize option. Then we can just go with our Django-Ninja. So Django-Ninja supports async, right? So we just have to go with my async def. Then I can just call it my, let's say, async list view. Then I will just pass in my request. Very nice. Then I can just do the same thing we did here, the same function we had here. Just pass in the same function here. Then I will paste it here. Right, nothing changes because our main function is an async function, so this will work. Right, perfect. So let's go it from dot details import my run async. Right, perfect. So this is another way we can also do that. You can omit this and then return the context here because we have the schema. And then inside our application, we need to decorate it. So API dot get, that's a method, and then you specify the endpoint. So the endpoint is going to be called async list view, right? And then this will take the response, which is going to be my duration or data schema. Perfect, right? So this will be our output serializer that is going to be to serialize our response. If I save it, how do we use it within our REST framework? So I'll go back to my URLs here, and then inside here, let's go. This is going to be my Ninja API, right? You can easily just paste it here. So we can do this. We have from dot import API view2, right? And then we are using APIView2 to help us with the URLs, right? and it is simple. We can simply do that here. So I want to, you can do it here. You can just go with my path and let's call it as I said Ninja, just to make it different. Then I'll pass in my, I have to close this one here. APIView dot URLs. This dot URLs is coming from here, right? Perfect. So let's see how to make it work. So I'll just go back again to here. So from API v2 import API as say Ninja API, something like this, right? So this is the best way, except we have to do API.urls, right? But we don't want to do that. Yeah, so this is better. It's better, it's this way, right? Okay, so now if I refresh it, so we have our endpoint, we have the list view and the other view, but you see that we cannot still see. So for us to see it, you have to go back to our URLs, our main URLs here, and then we need to also include it, right? We need to include Ninja API or Django Ninja, so that Django Ninja is able to see that URL in our main project URL, right? Otherwise it will not see it. That is one of the ways, but it will still work. I think it will work. This will work. So what I'll do is this works. Let's go back again. Let's put this one on top. Then let's refresh. So we only have one here and then the other one, but we cannot still see the Ninja. Okay, yes, I know. We have to change the route. So the route is, that's why it is not working. So the route, we call it as Ninja, right? So Ninja, that was the name. This is the name, right? So that is how it will work. Funny. Yeah, and then we have our own one here. And then we have the list view here. So let's try it out. Because now Django Ninja has its own way of creating the swagger, right? So all of this, we have seen some various ways in which we can create a proxy API that is using synchronous and asynchronous, and you have seen the difference between them and different ways we can use them using Django Async, using Django Ninja, which is what we are doing now, and then using Django Async DRF, right, to accomplish the same thing. And you see that this is taking some time. So sometimes the best approach is when you're using an async. Let's finish. 41 seconds. 41 seconds is better than the previous one. Remember that the previous ones that we had different seconds, right? So 41 seconds is okay. Perfect. So that is one of the ways, right? We can do these things. The other alternative is that we can also, instead of running all of this using manage.py, as you have seen here, we can also use Uvicorn. So pip in production, pip install Uvicorn. because Uvicorn is an asynchronous gateway engine, not Gunicorn, right, which is different. So Uvicorn is asynchronous, and then we can use this Uvicorn to run our application. So let's see that. That's finished, or hopefully it's finished. Let's just finish. So to work with it, you just go with my Uvicorn, right, and then you specify the path to the application, right? So if I think that's finished by now, we have same 41, right, pivot. So to use Uvicorn to run this, in most cases we have WSG, which is what is used by default in most application, but in case you want to use the asynchronous, you need this one, ASGI, right, and this is already set for you. So you have to call this application, and then you do that by coming back to the application here. So let me stop this. This is working because it's development server, so it's going to be Uvicorn, right? And then with this approach, you just have to specify that you want to use Uvicorn to run, right? So it's going to be Uvicorn, then the name of the project is async IO project, which is referring to this project file here, this async IO project. Inside this we have async ASGI, so, and then we have application. So this, then we have ASGI, then inside this we have my application, then we can reload, right? So this is here, so this is the application. So inside this file ASGI we have application, and this is found inside the project, right? So now this is running, and the reload means that reload anytime there are some changes. So this is the preferred way to run asynchronous server using Uvicorn instead of using the normal one. So I go back here and then I run this. Let's see if there's any improvement, and then I'll go back to the other one, which was this one here. Funny how Swagger docs, right? So it's supposed to be Swagger. So sometimes this fails because you have to recompile. So let's one of them finish first. So thank you for watching this tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can post at the comments below. I hope you have learned something. I hope it's not too long and too boring. This is just me trying to see how to use async in Django and Django RestFramework. In another tutorial, we see how to use Django Async DRF, right, in another tutorial. I've seen how to build a very simple proxy service. So our API is using 3 different approaches to call an external API to return some data, right? Yep, that's finished, right? This is using the other way. And if I go back to the 121, we had this one working. If I go to the Swagger, it's failing. Login, we cannot find it, I think because you have to recompile for you to see it, but yeah, you have gotten that point. Because and sometimes, like in project, the reason sometimes this may fail is because of you have to save Uvicorn. Once, because you're using Uvicorn, sometimes you have to save it from Nginx, right, so that you'll be able to see the Swagger, right? So you cannot find the Swagger, right? That's why it's failing, right? It cannot find it, so not found, because we are using Uvicorn. So we need an Nginx server to be able to help us with that, right? It's a caveat. So let's go back here, and then we can just do this again. Hopefully it works. Yeah, right. So it cannot find it because Gunicorn is not saving the static file. That's the reason. So thank you for watching the tutorial. See you another time. I hope you have learned something. Stay blessed. Bye.